Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 is getting incredibly close to release. As we know, it is set to come out in April according to some of the news we've been getting throughout the Poppy Playtime Discord. So with that being said, we are figuring out tons of new things about the future of Poppy Playtime and what the game will actually end up including in the near future, with updates almost every other day at this point, giving us heaps of new information about the next chapter. So the last Poppy video I made, I uploaded it on April Fool's Day, and a lot of you guys thought it was all a joke, so I'll recap some of that information as well. In that video, we found out that Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 is almost done, and was said last week to be within 3 weeks of releasing, so about 2 weeks now, I'd assume. It was confirmed this chapter would be dropping on both PC and mobile at the same time and date, but there wasn't any sort of confirmation on any specific date, or if that estimation was even 100% accurate. There was some more merch announced by the team, along with confirmation of apparently 15 soundtracks inside of Chapter 2, which is amazing. The Caterpillar character is supposedly going to be altered to be more scary and fit the chapter's theme better. There is said to be brand new toys that have never been seen before this chapter, which is super cool, because right now we know of around 5 or 6 ones, and apparently there's going to be a lot more in the coming chapters. With this tease, we were given quite a few images that show toy boxes, along with one more huge teaser image on Twitter, showing the second chapter's main protagonist attacking the player, giving a lot of speculative clues as to what the next chapter is going to look and be like. There's text engraved in the floor, blood splattered on the wall. The previous toys that we know and love were strapped up into the webs onto the roof, while this new character is reaching her hand out towards us, assumingly to attack. Something I didn't ever mention inside of my previous video was that it seems pretty obvious that this room is going to be the setting of a boss battle against this creature. And the reason I think that is because while we didn't see a huggy boss battle, but rather a chase scene, either way in Chapter 1 it was formatted with one climax after tons of suspense, where in the end we finally came face to face with the large beast himself, which imaginably will at least be somewhat similar in this chapter, where we instead may actually approach the antagonist herself to fight our way free. Anyway, that's all that we were told from a few days ago, but there's been multiple new updates giving us more information since. The first one that we got was released right after I uploaded my last update video on April 1st with some smaller details. We were told that Chapter 2 first off was going to be over 2 hours long, which is actually very surprising. If you even slightly know what you're doing, the current Chapter 1 for this game can easily be beaten in less than 30 minutes. And while this game looks and plays super well in a lot of ways, there were tons of people who still didn't enjoy it because it was just too basic and short to really provide much to the table, which seems to make sense. But it's great to see that we can expect like 4 times the amount of content this time around. Apparently one of the new toys that is appearing in the chapter is also supposed to have voice lines, which in a game where there's not very many voices at all, this is cool to see. And also we were given a sort of announcement to an announcement of the game's actual release day, because in this post we were told that the game's set in stone release date was going to be announced about a week prior to it coming, so a specific release date announcement should be coming soon. The most vague thing that we were told in this announcement is that, quote, "Swappables are one of the most popular products in Playtime Co," which really confuses me, but from what I've asked on Discord, Swappables are supposedly some types of toys in the factory that'll be able to change out parts from each other, which sounds super cool in concept, but it also kind of freaks me out because who knows what kind of weird monster configuration could be attacking us in Chapter 3 if that's the case. Anyway, finally in this update we are told that the toy that we already know named Braun is also going to have voice lines, which is going to be cool to see, and hopefully Braun will have some significance in the next chapter with that being said, because honestly he played no significance and hardly existed in Chapter 1. So anyway, that's all the updates that we were given on April 1st, but we ended up getting even more news here on the 5th when I'm recording this with some interesting clues. The first thing we know is that the second chapter is going to be harder, which I think is super good, especially if they take inspiration from some of the Chapter 1's puzzle styles like the power mechanic, because those things were all so cool in concept, it just was quite disappointing that all the puzzles ended up being so easy. In terms of merch, that is actually pretty interesting. They announced that in May there was going to be 3 separate Poppy Playtime figures coming out at some point. I don't know who exactly is going to be manufacturing these. I had brought up the idea of Funko Pops being a thing eventually, but I wouldn't imagine it would be this soon. The characters of these figures are going to be Poppy herself, Huggy from Chapter 1 as well, and finally the actual player. Well, I guess that sort of indirectly tells us that we'll eventually get some sort of character reveal in the next chapter, just because if there's going to be a figure of the player, we don't even know what they look like at all yet, so that'll be an interesting reveal. We are told that there's going to be more exploring in Chapter 2, which is kind of a given since it's supposed to be significantly longer than the first, and there's also going to be more voice lines, which once again seems interesting, at least if it's done well. Although in my opinion, I kind of preferred the silence in the first chapter, because it made the ambience shine through even more, and seeing things like the Chapter 2 trailer where the antagonist directly talks to us made it feel less creepy. But if it's done in the right way, I can still see it working out. Anyway, the final thing that we were given in regards to Chapter 2 news is that apparently something big in the lore will have an answer in Chapter 2. Now, when I say that, I think there's a few lore-based options to choose from. There's the potential that we may figure out who the player is and their story, because as mentioned, we are getting a figure of them in a couple months, so we need to know who the player is and be able to connect with them on some level. But it also could maybe be an explanation on where these monsters came from, because one of the most burning questions on everyone's mind right now in terms of lore is where in the world did these small little toys go to become these monstrous beasts that roam the factory? I know a lot of people are speculating this game's story to be similar to Bendy, where all the employees got turned into these characters, which would honestly be super disappointing but somewhat possible. Although I don't think we'll find out anytime soon, because I feel like that would sort of reveal the entire plot of the game, since the story of Poppy Playtime revolves around the player exploring the factory to find out what happened to the missing employees. So I don't think they would reveal that much about the game in just the second chapter, but we can hopefully wait and see. With this announcement, we were given some teaser images as well that I don't feel like tells us too much, honestly. They're clearly just close-up pictures of the new spider-like antagonist, so I don't think they give us too much information, but there is something I've sort of noticed about her that I don't think has been brought up very much. These characters that attack us are clearly supposed to be alive, and Huggy, for example, seems to live up to that pretty well. He's super furry, has tons of saliva, and when he's killed, he spills blood onto the railings. But there's something that has always felt off about this new character. Looking at these two new screenshots, don't they sort of look more mechanical rather than living? I mean, just looking at the glare coming off of the character's skin and the marks on the side of it, it looks like it's made of some sort of metal or something rather than being lifelike like Huggy, which seems incredibly weird. We do know that she's most likely based on a toy version of herself, so this very much could just be pictures of that. But I wonder if there's something interesting to be said about this new character and how much different she is than anything else we've seen. Then again, we do also know Poppy, who is alive and clearly looks more like a doll than a human, so I could be overanalyzing, but it's something that seems interesting to at least bring up. And if nothing else, it tells us that if we have to physically fight this character and kill her like we did Huggy, I feel like we're gonna be in for a real nightmare, because she just looks like a room-sized angry block of steel coming straight for us. Another small thing I didn't mention about these release notes is that the team sort of attempted to justify the amount of time this game is taking by saying that the animations were incredibly complex and that's what's holding them back in the end. So if any of you guys were wondering what's making this take as long as it is, that is apparently one of the reasons, along with the fact that this chapter is overall just so much bigger than the first one, so imaginably it would take a decent amount of time. Overall, I'm super glad they're giving us so much transparency throughout this game's development, because there's so many indie game developers that for some reason just think it's a smart idea to ghost the entire community for months at a time when they develop a game, when in the end all that does is make people wonder if the game's even still in development, and then they stop caring. But Poppy has done the exact opposite, and they instead are constantly doing all sorts of Q&As, along with all these consistent server announcements, which is what I think could turn this small YouTuber game into one of the better indie game titles, because I personally, among other people, love this community. The only thing that I would say concerns me for this game is just how controversial it overall has been, because there's been all sorts of cases of bad things from the past showing up about these developers, those of which could be potential red flags for the future of the game's development moving forward, and I talk about that in this video here. Go check it out. Make sure to join my Discord, subscribe, and peace.